Ray was born with a special condition. During her mother's pregnancy, she started forming as a man, but at the end of her development, her female hormones became dominant. This resulted in Ray having characteristics from both sexes. Her body, voice, and face were completely female. However, when she was just 5 years old, she started to grow a dense and lush beard. Her father, worried, decided to take her to the doctor so he could diagnose her. However, the doctor had never seen any other case like that before, so he had no idea what could be causing her condition. And so, after studying her case, the doctor concluded that there was no treatment which could stop her beard from growing, and that her only solution was to shave regularly. Her father was very ashamed. He was a very traditional man, and in his eyes, he was raising a monster. If people in town discovered that his little daughter was so different and strange, his reputation would be completely ruined. And thus, he decided to get rid of his own daughter. He knew that every once in a while, a traveling circus would come to the nearby town, and they had a very special show where all the performers had different kinds of deformities. He recently saw a poster publicizing their arrival, and that gave him an idea. He arrived early to the circus on the day of the show with the intention of offering his daughter to them in exchange of a nice sum of money. And as soon as he showed his daughter to the circus owners, they immediately realized that a bearded woman would attract a lot of curious spectators. So after receiving the money, the father left her daughter under the custody of those strangers. And after returning to his house, many times he considered going back for her, but the deed was done. He gave her away, and if he simply said that she disappeared, nobody would judge him. He didn't think Ray would be mistreated, but the first thing the circus owners did was throw her in a cage. Since she was still a small child, it could be prosecuted if people saw her performing. And so, until she became an adult, they forced her to secretly work as their helper. In other words, they made her their slave. During that time, Ray saw horrible things. She saw how the deformed were treated worse than animals. They would be mocked and laughed at and would get beat up whenever they disobeyed. And to make matters worse, feeling like monstrous freaks, the deformed would ironically end up mistreating each other too. Ray never experienced any nice interactions with the other circus workers, only insults and abuse. On one of her first mornings there, the Siamese twins woke her up by pulling her beard and laughing until they made her cry. Over the years, her relationship with the other circus workers didn't improve. And eventually, when she became an adult, the circus owners decided it was time to show her to the world. They told her that she didn't have to do anything, just come out and show her face. Ray had never been shaved since she was enslaved. This was so that when she was finally shown to the world, her beard would be thicker and longer than any man's. The circus owners were sure she would become a star, and the bearded woman would soon appear on the cover of all the newspapers. However, her first performance did not go well at all. As soon as she got on the stage, the public started to boo her. They threw stones at her and called her a monster. And Ray was so devastated that she got off the stage crying before her act was over. Ray couldn't sleep that night. She curled up onto the hay in a corner of her cage and endured the laughs and mockery of the other deformed who had seen the show. She remembered her childhood and how happy she was before her father sold her off, and she wondered about the whereabouts of her family, even though she deeply despised them for what they did to her. The Siamese twins and the dwarfs spent hours and hours yelling at her and calling her coward. And sick of all the abuse, she questioned them and asked them why were they insulting her and each other. If everyone else insults and rejects them, how come they didn't support each other? That night, Ray's speech got the other deformed to think about and question what they were doing, at least for a while. The next day, just like the circus owners predicted, Ray was on the cover of the most popular newspapers and magazines. It was the first time the world had seen the bearded woman, and her tears were filmed by a journalist. Ray knew that at this rate, she would spend the rest of her life receiving more and more abuse. And after mulling over this, she came to the conclusion that she couldn't give in. She couldn't keep living on her knees and endure more and more mistreatment for the rest of her existence. And so Ray decided not only to change her mindset, but her body as well. She started to train heavily and gained such musculature that her mere presence inspired reverence. At first, the deformed would laugh at Ray when they saw her train, but later on, they ended up fearing her. A few months later, she went from being the most insulted by the deformed to their leader. And every show filled with people wanting to see her and take photos of her. Ray's fame extended to other countries and she became an international star. Then one day, looking at the posters of their next events, Ray realized that she would have to perform in the very town where her father sold her to the circus. So she asked permission to her bosses to go out and visit her former family. They didn't want to leave her alone since she could escape, but she was such a huge source of income for them that they accepted under one condition: that a watchman would be following her the entire time. A few weeks passed and the time came to go back to where everything started. She didn't remember very well where her former house was, but she did remember the names of her parents and managed to find their house by asking the neighbors. Ray arrived at her former home and knocked on the door. An older man opened it, and his jaw dropped as soon as he saw her. "Monster, you're a monster! We want nothing to do with you!" yelled the man, who then slammed the door shut. Ray felt a piercing pain in her heart, and then her chest started burning. Not thinking rationally, Ray knocked down the front door with a single kick. She then approached her father and strangled him to death. She then approached her mother, who wouldn't stop screaming, and ended her life as well, stabbing her with a knife. Ray felt sick, although she also felt satisfied after finally getting revenge. They made her feel like a freak and had to spend her entire life suffering and feeling abandoned. After what happened, her gaze changed completely. It's like she was a different person now. With her clothes and hands covered in blood, Ray rushed out of the house, hoping that nobody else had seen her. However, she remembered that her bosses hired a watchman to follow her, so she looked for him all around her. She eventually found him hiding behind a car and killed him as well. There were a few hours left before the show started, so Ray decided to go back to her childhood home to wash herself. She arrived back to the circus just in time to see the host starting the show. But then, she gathered all the other deformed to talk to them. Our entire lives, they've been laughing at us, mocking us, and paying to humiliate us just for our appearance. They throw stones at us and even call us the circus of the deformed, as if we are not people. And so, after Ray's speech, the deformed devised a plan not only to get revenge, but also to get their freedom back. They waited until it was Ray's turn to get on the stage, and that's when they attacked. The deformed had surrounded the entire tent and were armed with knives, bats, and whips ready to carry out a massacre. Their main target were the circus owners, but they didn't forget about the audience who came to see the show. And although some people managed to escape, most of them were murdered by Ray the bearded woman and the rest of the deformed. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode.